Good afternoon. My name is Debbie Castanon, and I'm here with Mary Morshed presenting Managing Privacy Risk with Privacy Impact Assessments. And I'd like to introduce you to Mary, who currently manages the Tactical Security Engineering and Consulting Group, which has the responsibility for security architecture, security intelligence, and penetration vulnerability testing. Mary has 22 years with the state of California. She's had dual positions as Chief Information Security Officer and Privacy Officer for two major state agencies, I might add. And she has 25 years information technology and security experience in public sector organizations. She also holds several security certifications, including CISSP, Security Plus, and CRISC. She holds a CIPP-G and CIPP-T, which is from the International Association of Privacy Professionals that deals with privacy. She also has earned her Master's of Information Management and Systems degree with a focus on IS and privacy from the UC Berkeley School of Information. Very impressive.
Thank you, Debbie.
And then I'm Debbie Castanon. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer for the Department of Motor Vehicles. I have responsibility over information dealing with 8,500 state employees. And of course, you're probably very familiar with DMV's work and their customer base, but just briefly, we have 27 million driver's license or identification cards and over 32 million vehicle registrations, so lots of data. I also have certifications with the International Association of Privacy Professionals. I'm a CIPP corporate G and IT, and I have over 25 years of experience in state agency work. And I'm also the co-founder of the Sacramento Privacy Network. So with that, we'll start our presentation.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to start off by a little bit of update if you haven't already seen it. Carlos Ramos, the state CIO, mentioned in his keynote a little earlier that the State Office of Information Security recently released new policy updates in the area of information security. And one of those we want to draw your attention to is SAM, which stands for the State Administration Manual, Section 5305.6, which talks about risk management. So in the past, there was a requirement that state entities perform risk management, but they've gotten a lot more specific on what's required now. So if we look at the top bullet, it talks about each state entity shall create state entity-wide information security, privacy, and risk management strategy, which includes, of course, acceptable risk assessment methodologies. So did anybody else read that and say, what does that mean? So that's what we're here to try to help you figure out. It also talks about methodologies that are consistent with NIST, and NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology that is a federal government entity. And they have special publications that they publish on a regular basis and update it regularly to help federal agencies be compliant with certain requirements of information security. And so if you go to NIST today, the site will be down because they are shut down right now. But when they come back up, if you haven't gone there, take a look at those particular publications, the -30 and the -39, to give you a little more insight into what some of the risk management looks like from the federal perspective. In addition, I believe these slides are going to be available on the Symposium's website. So if you do have any questions or would like a copy and they're not available, Debbie's card and my card are up here on the front table. So at the end of the session, if you'd like more information, that information will be here as well. as we move through, Sam also gave us a definition. Nice. Definitions are good to have on privacy. So it talks specifically about privacy can be understood as the rights of individuals as defined by law to control the collection and use of their personal information. So in this particular sense, in the way that the state of California defines privacy, it's more of an informational privacy, so privacy about the information or data elements, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that a little later on. And the last definition that we'd like you all to kind of be familiar with is privacy impact assessment. And the key points here is that this is a methodology. It's also a tool that can be used for assessing the impacts of privacy or on privacy of a particular initiative. And the key there, I think that's really important to understand, is that the impacts on privacy, so whose privacy would that be? That's a key piece of it. And what parts of privacy? And we're going to try to help uncover some of that today.
Okay, so how many of you are currently doing privacy impact assessments? Okay, great to see that there are some. Now, who want to be doing, which of you would like to be doing privacy impact assessments if you knew how to do them? Okay, so, you know, when we've been looking at this issue, not only in the work that we do, but in the research that Mary has done with her degree, we found that it was very difficult to get into that space to do the privacy impacts, because it's not just IT systems as well. It is for other systems, those manual processes that you have, where you have a hard copy that has, let's say, an application that has a SSN on it or a DL. And what are those processes? Are they secure in themselves? So it's not just about IT systems, but it also is about those manual processes. So it's getting in there to those business entities, those owners of the data, to be able to say, hey, I can help you. Now, one of the things that I use with these business entities, and some of those control agencies as well, because it's hard to get into those, is to say, I'm the person you really want in those initial meetings on those projects, because I'm like the Indiana Jones. I go look for that gold. The gold is the PII, it's the SSNs, it's the DLs. I look for that gold. I'm just tenacious about getting that gold and looking at your flow. Where does it go? How do you use it? You know, do you have the authority to collect it? Do you really use it? If you don't use it, why are you collecting it? But then, you know, going through the flow of where it travels. Once I know that, and if they really need that gold, then I look at other entities to mitigate the risk for that. We have our enterprise architects. We have the state, we have our ISO, and say, hey, you need to protect this gold. So I look for the gold. You want me to find that gold, so you know how to protect yourself. So that's usually how I get my foot in the door. I usually don't like to get my foot in the door after a project when it's a little too late to bolt in that security, or there's been a breach, you know, pay me now or pay me later. I want to be in at the beginning, when they have that concept that they're thinking about. So I'm looking at those relationships and creating awareness. I'm looking at those gatekeepers. I'm looking at the people I can make relationships with, teach them, and then have them contact me when they see something. The contracts unit, the FSR unit, the enterprise architects, you know, those people who know, we've got this business entity, they're now looking at this technology, or they want this system, or a change to the system. You know, looking at legislation. So, you know, it's those type of things that we need to look at. We want to reduce that risk because we don't want to have breaches. Now, it's not just, you know, a state entity having a breach that affects that entity. It affects us all. If I have a breach, they're not going to trust my entity, but they're not going to trust government, period. So, you know, we have to do this together. And then we're also showing our due diligence and knowing that we are following statute about, you know, why we're collecting this information. Thank you. So, who's impacted by privacy breach? I think we just recently heard about this in this last session here. It's not just customers or consumers. It's those other entities, especially if, like in that breach that we just heard about, it was the children as well that are on those tax forms. It's businesses who are affected. It's our business partners. It's that reputational harm. It's the entire organization. Again, it's government. And they look at us going, okay, can we trust you? And yet they don't have a choice. We're the only game in town for their driver's license.
Okay, well, we can talk a little bit now about some examples of privacy fails that we all see in the news on a regular basis. Some of the recent ones I want to talk about and bring your attention, which you probably have already heard, of course, the NSA and the things that they've been doing. So in general, just the work that NSA has done up to this point, doesn't seem like there's been a lot of thoughtfulness around balancing the individual's right to privacy and the security of the nation. And I think there's been a lot of talk in the news about how to correct that. NSA is looking at hiring their first ever privacy official. So isn't that great? That's great news. Kind of what plays right into what Debbie said is that, pay me now or pay me later. Bring me in beforehand or bring me in to help you clean up the breach. So we're seeing that. In addition, we've got companies like Google that have had several privacy missteps recently. One as recent as September 13th or August 9th. They were fined $22.5 million by the FTC for bypassing privacy settings in the Safari browser. So users that were accessing Google using the Safari browser had particular privacy settings that they had configured, and Google was ignoring those settings. In addition, there it was, September 27th, France actually decided to fine Google about $402,000 US over its failure to observe their data privacy rules. So big companies like that not only have to be cognizant and compliant with US law, but these are companies that have a global presence and are also balancing privacy laws and regulations across the globe. Makes it a lot more difficult. And lastly, on I think it was the 13th of September, Minnesota's Health Information Exchange had a breach. It's called MNsure was the name of their health exchange, and about 2,400 records were breached within days of going online. And this kind of falls right back into what Carlos said in that with that South Carolina breach is that Minnesota said we complied with all the requirements of the federal government's Health Information Exchange. So it's not that people are necessarily just putting in systems and not thinking about privacy, but they are putting them in, thinking they're compliance, and maybe haven't spent quite enough time actually assessing the actual risks moving forward. So the next slide is, what does privacy management look like? So we're going to assume, but if you have questions, please let us know, that most of you are familiar with risk management methodology. So this class is not to talk about risk management, although it plays the basic underlying kind of education surrounding privacy impact assessments. And privacy risk management looks a lot like other methodologies and risk management models. And this particular graphic came from the Office or the Information and Privacy Commissioner in Ontario, Canada, and they've done a lot of work in privacy impact assessments and managing privacy risks. And I'm not going to go quite through the whole phases for you, but if you kind of glance at it and you're familiar with risk management, it looks pretty familiar. What's different about privacy risk management than general risk management methodologies? I would say for the most part, we're mostly dealing with informational privacy, which is what the state's definition of privacy talked about earlier. And we're focusing on PII, and Debbie talked about PII as well, which is personally identifiable information. And PII is information that identifies an individual or can be reasonably linked to an individual, and those particular data elements. So for the most part, when you're looking at privacy impact assessments here with the state, you're dealing with PII and identifying certain types of data elements. And that's what's a little bit different from privacy risk management than other types of risk management. You're looking at in combination, and so that's kind of the piece that is a little bit different. As we move ahead and talk a little bit more about risk management, because it wouldn't be fair for us to talk a lot about risks and not kind of tell you what they are, we've also both noticed in our past experience that people get vulnerabilities and risks mixed up. What's the difference and what are they? And so starting with the bottom definition, a vulnerability is a weakness, most likely in an information system. But then a risk actually is a combination of things. So the risk is the likelihood or a probability that a loss of information or information assets would occur. And that again goes back to our SAM definition. So we tried to make this as relevant to the state as possible. But you know, vulnerabilities is only one factor that gets calculated into identifying a risk. You also need to think about your threats, the likelihood of the occurrence, the probable loss or consequences, which in this case in privacy would be harms to individuals or harms to the organization, and the risk appetite of the organization. All those factors need to go into identifying what are your risks.
So are we understanding risk? I mean, when I first started in this, I didn't know there was math. Okay, risk appetites. I was, okay, wait a minute. It sounds like my diet, you know. So I wasn't really clear on what all these terms were. But I did work through with our auditors on what risk was and understand it now much better. You know, those auditors really have a handle on it. So if you don't have an understanding of risk, you can go to other areas to get that information. And I think we've found that more and more we need to educate each other about what risks are. I thought it was vulnerability, you know, and no, I was wrong on something else. So what we have done is we're thinking about doing another, some other series on risk and privacy risk. So we do have a sign-up sheet here if you're interested in other sessions related to privacy and privacy risk. But use your other resources, use your auditors, they understand risk management, and then convert it into your privacy risks. So the baby steps here. You want to insert that methodology where you can in an existing process like your project lifecycle. Get to know those project managers, they're great. They know when everything's going to be scheduled, they can put you into that process. And again, look for those areas where you want to know where things are going to be happening, whether it's the FSR process, the concept process, during strategic planning. Try to find the legislation that's been approved or is going to be approved so you are prepared. One of the problems I had was I was not that familiar with DMV. So I had to learn the DMV system, but I also had to learn where those triggers or gateways were so we could insert ourselves. And the gateways, this means that you get approval for the privacy office to sign off on documents before they go forward, whether it's design or not. One thing I realized with project management at DMB was that we had the security assessment and the privacy assessment done at the same time. We hadn't really thought about it. Well, you really want that privacy assessment done first because you're finding the gold. You need to hand that off. Some of those things that you find might go back to security. That's not to say that you can't have them at the same time, but you need to be communicating with the security staff to say, hey, this is what we found. Here are our findings. Here are some issues. You need to be working collaboratively with that area. So again, it's getting your foot in the door with project management, making sure that it's not just that questionnaire during the FSR, but that you're actually inserted into the project management process, and that you have sign-off, that you have the approval, that the CIO says, yeah, this can't go forward unless a PIA is done and the CPO signs off, or the ISO who's doing those duties. It also is ensuring that your business know why you're doing this. Many times I was received with, oh, you're just going to delay the project. Well, no, I'm here to say, I want to protect your data. I want to protect you so you're not in the news or the media. I want to make sure that everything is safe. We found everything. Everything's where it should be and protected so that you're not in the media. So I will work with you to get it done without delay. They're just concerned about the delay. When you're working with your project management team, you can get it done fast.
So we talk a little bit about the process, but who does what within a privacy impact assessment? So I recently did some research work outside of the public sector. This was private sector only, to determine how large IT companies take a look at and manage privacy risk. And there were some patterns that we were able to identify, and just identifying the different stages of the process itself. So when you're looking at inserting a new PIA in your organization or refining what you currently are doing, this can help you move forward. And I don't know how, oh yeah, it shows up much better on that screen than it does on mine. So the first piece I want to talk about is what's called a threshold assessment. And what that does is that will determine whether or not the initiative actually needs to be analyzed any further. So in that case, a lot of times that's a question and answer, and what's asked of the business is, are you collecting any of those specialized data elements that we've already identified make up PII or confidential information that we need to be concerned about from a privacy perspective? If the answer is no, we're just going to be providing an application to maybe make it easier for folks to access our publicly available services or our website from a smartphone, then you're done with that particular incident. Or that assessment. That's done. There's no reason to move any farther. But if some of those answers are yes, and we're going to go into and show you some of what these PIA tools look like. But if your answer is yes, then you go to the next stage, which is kind of an intake process. And what happens during the intake process is that the business unit either fills out and answers questions themselves, or they sit down and meet with some of your privacy folks in your organization, and they answer questions to determine what you're going to be doing with the information, how it's going to be managed. Do they have a legitimate need to collect that particular PII information or not? So that's all done during a collection process, and we kind of call that an intake process. The next piece, which is a lot more complicated, is the actual privacy analysis work that happens. And that's where you're looking at the particular initiative, and you're applying either compliance frameworks that your organization has adopted, or you're looking at just identifying the riskiness of the particular information that they're collecting, sharing, or processing. The next phase, and usually that's mostly your privacy professionals. Now, some organizations actually have groups outside of the privacy office where they have either they call them privacy champions or privacy friends. And these are folks that are kind of trained to spot privacy issues before they get too big in the business lines. And so that's another area. I think Debbie talked a little bit about the audit shop, working closely with them, the project management office. Those are the times that you can start building up these privacy resources in the organization to help educate them and be your eyes and ears out in the rest of the organization to spot these privacy issues. But typically during the analysis, you've got people that are trained in privacy that are looking at and identifying the risks, and also working with the security team to say, are there some technical safeguards that we can use to mitigate some of these risks or not? And so then you're developing some type of a risk mitigation plan at that point that would get fed back into the privacy initiative. So, of course, we always have some pushback, and we get the next question, well, we're comfortable with those risks. We don't really need to mitigate them. So what do you do there? You need to have some type of an escalation process built in before you get to that point. So anybody now that's doing privacy impact assessments, do they currently have escalation plans in place? Maybe in theory, maybe they're not working so well. Yeah, it's hard. So it's kind of developing a governance structure for your privacy program and escalating those particular issues up so that those risks are raised. And then lastly, you've got this approval process where once all the risks have been identified, either mitigation is going to be put in place, or somebody's agreed to accept the risks from your governance area. Then there's this approval process, which also includes kind of a circling back, making sure that what was approved once the particular initiatives goes live is done. That's where you work with your audits group to ensure that what was agreed upon was actually implemented. And that's kind of an overall look at what the particular processes are in a privacy impact assessment. Any questions on some of that? Okay, good.
So let me just go back.
Go right ahead.
Just real quickly. So those who actually do the privacy impact assessments, if you haven't done them before, it's really a interview process that maybe those individuals who are used to doing FSRs are more used to doing. It's really trying to, or business analysts, they're trying to get information out of the business. And sometimes that it's sometimes agonizing, but it's back and forth and asking those questions about their process. So it's not just I'm sending you the form, fill it out. You really need to know a little bit more and ask them questions that may lead to other questions. So you might hit up your FSR or business analyst to help you with that type of process. And then in the approval process, well, not so much the approval process, but the mitigation and escalation. I'm also in charge of incident management for privacy and security incidents. So I've created a method to do the analysis and escalate issues that need to be escalated to executive management. I use that same process for PIAs. So if you can get that approved through that process and they see this, they can trust that they can use this process, we tend to get approvals done very quickly. So use an existing process that you know they're familiar with, that shows the analysis, they love the analysis, and your recommendation. So use an existing process. Okay, so the tools to conduct a PIA. There are templates, and we'll go over some of those. They're Word documents. There are also systems that are automated systems that we've seen. The organization that I'm involved with, IAPP, has a local chapter called KnowledgeNet. We've gone over some of these automated PIA systems. Very complex, but you can certainly do it very simply with an Excel spreadsheet like we do at DMV. So let's go over some of these questionnaires. So you really follow the privacy principles, purpose specification. You're asking a question about, do you have, the authorization? Do you have, what are you doing with this information? You're assessing the risks. And in our template, we actually color code who's responsible for answering these questions. Now, we may share with them that form, but we don't expect them to fill it out. We will get together with them at a meeting and discuss the issues. Do you understand what this means? Because not everybody understands risk the same way. They don't even sometimes understand their own processes. So we go back and forth with them, helping them to understand what the questions are, getting answers. And then we, as the privacy office, assess the risk. We don't go through it with them because then they get a little nervous about, well, what do you mean? That's high risk. So, so that's our template, which we can certainly discuss at offline or at another session. There's also a PIA from the Department of Homeland Security. The one that we use was actually from the Department of Justice that we modified, and I'm still looking to modify it. So there are also templates from Homeland Security, which are more of a, it's not a grid, it's just some questions that you have. Again, identifying the information that they're collecting. Oops, sorry. Here's one from US Tech Company. Again, it's just a questionnaire about, what they're doing with their information.
But one of the things I want to point out here is that you're going to see when you look at these in detail that they're looking at different things. So different data is being collected. Not all the same data is going to be collected in your PIA as opposed to, for example, the information that's of interest to DMV or an IT technical company. So you customize your PIA based upon your individual needs. It may be that you change wording around that familiar to your organization. It may be that you're not really that interested in a certain facet of a PIA. If you're just looking at setting up a new process for your organization, take a look at several different PIA templates out there before you actually adopt one, and don't feel threatened or scared to modify it or change it to better meet your needs. These are all different. They all look a little different. So for example, this one talks a lot about, you know, APIs and data that's outside of the control of the particular company. So it's data they're receiving from maybe a third party. Doesn't necessarily apply, you know, in all organizations. So, you know, be real specific and tailor it to the needs of your organization. And here's another template. This is kind of interesting. This is, again, the Canada Office of the Privacy Commissioner. And this one is actually a PIA that they put together for businesses in Canada to use as a model and to give them some ideas on what they should be doing for PIAs and collecting information, and kind of, it also kind of educates businesses as well. So it's not just about collecting the information and being able to assess it later on. It's about an education piece, and Debbie's brought that up several times. This is not just a process that you use. It's more than a process and a tool to identify risk. It's also to help educate as you go along and you meet with your different lines of business. And one more to take a look at is the Australia's PIA template. And what's kind of interesting here is they've actually put data model flows inserted in their template, and it's required when the government entities fill out a PIA in that country. So Canada's a good place to look at. Australia's another big proponent of PIAs and have used them in a long time. And if you didn't know, the U.S. government has been mandated since, I believe, 2002 to use PIAs to manage privacy risk. Not all of them are doing it well, though, as pointed out earlier.
So the PII life cycle. Well, after you've accepted the PIA, you want to monitor it not only through the project life cycle itself, but as you're going through and you're, let's say, 1 year out. These are the controls that you probably have given the auditors so that they're informed about what those controls are, and now they'll come in and audit the program. You want to look at the impacts on other processes. Now, how many of you are also involved with the privacy policy for your agency? So this feeds into that, because if something changes, you know, the authorization to collect, you know, what you're collecting, what you're doing with it, are you sharing it? That feeds into your privacy policy.
What you're tracking, maybe one system tracks things a little differently when your users are online. That's a new one that just came out. So
yes, so it almost has it doesn't die. The PIA doesn't die. You continually are looking back to it, looking to get input from your auditors that they're checking those controls. You're looking if that system has changed at all. They should be telling you, because if that's happening, you should be doing another PTA to see if it's a significant change to do another PIA. Such as if you have a system, you've done a PIA, now you have an online system. You may need to do another PIA, but you'll do a PTA to see how that works. And then you may have a mobile app that goes along with that system. So you may have PIAs going through all three of those systems.
Another thing I think Debbie mentioned earlier is the changes to that system. So if there's a significant update to a particular system, it may warrant another PIA being done. And so when Debbie talked about how do you plug into existing processes, your change management process is a good place to look for that.
Definitely. So again, you're going to be wanting to look at this as a living document, checking back on those systems, and then also if there's a way to improve that process. We found ways to improve our processes, changing our forms, getting feedback from our business partners, our business programs. And they have some very good insights on what to improve. So, again, the first steps, you know, again, for me, it was very difficult to try to get inserted into different areas. We were doing the privacy, what they call privacy security questionnaire for the FSR, and there was a space for us in projects, but we weren't really doing them. So once we had them educated with the project management team, and we rescheduled ourselves earlier in the project management life cycle, everybody was on board. Now they understood what we needed to do. And it's educating those project managers, those who are doing the FSRs and the concept papers, that we need to be involved from the get-go, because we need to know the business as is. We need to understand that, and then what we're going to. We need to do that compare. We need to be on the same page as the business folks. And then as we go through that process, that back and forth with the program people, with the questionnaire and with security there as well, to protect that gold, we'll do the analysis. We'll determine where we can mitigate. And there's another thing that I found. We were mitigating everything. I was beginning to wonder. It's like when the kids are quiet, you kind of go, oh, something's wrong here. So I started to look into it, and there were areas where maybe we should actually be accepting or doing other things. So it was understanding that risk management. And then again, those recommendations. Use a process that your executive management is comfortable with, or that program is comfortable with as well. You want to have your program in there with you, helping you go forward with, this is what we're recommending. You don't want it to be confrontational. You want to be on the same page. And typically you are. It's just explaining to them, educating them. There's an awareness that you have to do with them.
Debbie, can you talk a little bit about the time it takes for you and your staff to actually go through this process, so folks that are not doing them have realistic expectations?
So, when we do some systems, it can take anywhere for one analyst on one project to spend maybe 80 to 100 hours on one PIA. And again, it's that back and forth process, those open-ended questions of their processes to find out where that gold is. And some larger projects, it could take even more time, because it's also that scheduling and coordination with the different processes. It may not be one business group. We have something that could go through the enterprise, and we're looking at 9 divisions. So it could take quite a bit of time. And that's why you need to start it at the very beginning, at the concept stage, getting involved. Mm-hmm. So once we do come through with recommendations, it's again following up that they do what they're supposed to do in that recommendation. And whether it's a governance or an executive management, they're going to be asking you, so where are they in that point with those recommendations?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.